All right, so this is the objective of today's event. To clarify the difference between ISIS ideology and Islamic beliefs. We want to provide an effective rebuttal of ISIS ideology by use of Islamic beliefs and scholarship. We want to debunk misunderstandings and misconceptions about Islam and Muslims. And we want to build respect and trust between American Muslims and non-Muslims. So all of these things form one line. They're all interconnected. They're all very important. But before I go into ISIS and Islam, I want to make three preliminary remarks, things that I want to clear up some assumptions. So in Islam, the Quran tells us, say unto them, Allah or God is addressing the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and he's addressing the people. Say unto them, are those who know equal with those who don't know or know not? For only men of understanding will pay heed. So this distinguishes between those who dedicate themselves to learning or to knowledge and those who do not. So those who do, who have, instruct those who do not. And everyone has access to knowledge. And the second one is a hadith, or a saying of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that is, scholars are the inheritors of the Prophet. So a prophet comes, he teaches the people, everything's dynamic, and then generations later, the teachings fade, they get distorted, they get changed, they get obliterated by different things, usually from within, right? But the scholars are the guardians of the knowledge that the prophets taught them. So the prophet here is saying that these scholars are the inheritors of what the prophets teach. So that's why scholarship in Islam is a very important thing if you're a scholar. Preliminary remark number 2. This guy, his name is Dr. Vartan Gregorian. He's written this book called Islam, a Mosaic, not a Monolith. If you study Islamic history and Islamic beliefs, Islam is more of a mosaic of diverse perspectives. And no one Muslim has a monopoly on it. The beautiful thing about Islam is that everybody has access to knowledge. So the Quran is something that everybody should know. Everybody has to learn to read the Quran. So everybody has equal access to understand the Quran. Everybody has equal access to learn what the Prophet said, what the other scholars said throughout our history. And so Islam is a religion that is expressed in very diverse ways. So that's why he wrote this book, because this was right after September 11th. Finally, the third preliminary remark. This is very, very important. This is the president of the American Historical Association, Dr. Lynn Hunt. She's from a university, so she's a historian. So one of the problems that she says is whenever you talk about history of anything, so we're going to talk about the history of Islam, is that people in the present use their values and standards to judge the past. And this is very crippling intellectually, because just think about it. You live in 2015. Do you want to be judged by the standards of someone coming from 3015? No, because you don't even know what those standards are. So you're going to behave and think within your context, within the present time. Presentism is when you use the present way of thinking and standards and press it upon the past. And what it does is, she explains, the present, at its worst, encourages a kind of moral complacency and self-congratulation. So everything is bad in the past. So the Enlightenment scholars, to give you an example, created this three-phase history that they measure by. They said ancient, medieval, modern. So they created these three phases, and they practiced a great deal of presentism that distorted ancient and distorted medieval, and kept people from understanding those errors. They're actually not even errors. They created, the watertight errors. So presentism, don't do it. What we do as historians, because I study history, is that we try to understand the past as the people who lived it understood it. Then we can know what they were thinking as to the extent possible, and understand why they did the things they did. So presentism is not good. All right, so this is how Allah or Islam defines humanity. All right, so this is from the Quran. The first one is, O mankind, we created you male and female, made you nations and tribes that you may know one another. The noblest or the best of you in the sight of Allah is the best in conduct. So this eliminates all types of racism, classism, tribalism, your culture, the language you speak. These things are no excuses. Only your conduct, your conduct. And this assumes that there are moral values. So the Quran teaches you what the universal moral values are. The second verse is that anyone from Bani Adam, the tribe of Adam, the people of Adam, that's everybody on the planet Earth, all human beings, have dignity. And the dignity is given by the Creator. So nobody can take your dignity away. And that's where Islamic scholars, the Sharia scholars, deduced human rights from. Rights and responsibilities. If God had so willed, he could have surely made you one single community. But he willed otherwise in order to test you by means of what he vouchsafed unto you, so what he gave you. So it's Allah's plan that there would be different religions. And they would occupy different stages and developments of humanity. So the first religion, right? There was a saying in ancient times among the people of Adam. They said a sin was, if you feel ashamed of it, that was considered sinful. And that's how simple religion was. But as society progressed and created civilizations, and we moved from age to age to age, communities and societies became complex. Problems became more complex. And so the religions, the prophets and the messengers, their message to the peoples became more complex because they were facing more complex times, so they needed more complex solutions. So that's how human civilization from simple to very complex grew. But because we have diverse communities, the best conduct is try to consider each other. And finally, among his signs is the creation of the heavens and the earth, and in the variations of your languages and your colors. Verily, in that are signs for those who know. So all of these verses are how we define humanity in Islam. And they're basically self-explanatory. This is from the Prophet Muhammad. This is what, peace be upon him, this is what he said. A servant does not reach the reality of faith until he loves for all humanity the same good which he would love for himself. So this is one of the things that Karen Armstrong, the famous scholar of religion, or Houston Smith, even more famous scholar of religion, says. This is found in almost every community and civilization on the planet, this teaching. The second one is all mankind is from Adam and Eve. An Arab has no superiority over a non-Arab, nor a non-Arab has any superiority over an Arab. Also, white has no superiority over black, vice versa. This was from the last sermon the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, gave. Finally, O my servants, this is the Prophet quoting Allah. This is called a Hadith Qudsi. But it's from these things in paragraphs, that's the source where I'm getting it from. So Ahmad is the guy who collected the Hadiths. The same thing, Muslim, same thing. O my servants, I have forbidden injustice for myself and forbid it also for you. So avoid being unjust to one another. And so this applies to all of humanity. All the prophets, all the messengers taught this to their people. Finally, beware of oppression, for oppression will turn into excessive darkness in the day of resurrection. So all these things are also how Islam defines humanity. But when we get to ISIS, the question is, well, what about non-Muslims? Because a lot of Muslims and most non-Muslims think these only apply to Muslims. But that's incorrect. And here's the proof. The Quran says, if it had been your Lord's will, everybody would have believed. Everybody on earth. Will you then compel mankind against their will to believe? So when Islam came, you cannot compel Islam upon a people. There is no compulsion in religion. So you can't. Islam doesn't make sense unless you understand it and want to follow it. Then it makes sense. Then it's a living thing in your heart and mind. Other than that, it doesn't mean anything. And Allah says about the Jews and Christians, they're not all alike. Among them, of the earlier revelations, and this includes many people, not just Jews and Christians, but also Sabaeans, and this was extended to Persians and other peoples on the planet. There are upright people who recite God's message throughout the night. That means they're dedicated, and they prostrate themselves before Him. That means they're humble. They believe in God on the last day. They enjoin doing what is right and forbid what is doing wrong. So there's an ethical system there, a moral system there that they practice. And they vie with one another in doing good work. So it's not something that they do to show off. They do it because of their connection to their Creator. And those are among the righteous. That's who Allah defines as who are righteous. And whatever good they do, they shall never be denied the reward of it. For God is full of knowledge of those who are conscious of him. And finally, verily, those who have attained to faith, in the Quran, as well as those who follow the Jewish faith and the Christians and the Sabaeans, all who believe in God in the last day and do righteous deeds shall have their reward with the sustainer, and no fear need they have, and neither shall they grieve. So at the end, they will be rewarded for what they did. This is diverse communities. This is as the Quran is coming down. So the Prophet's not saying, this is my religion, all the religions are bad or wrong or this or that. So this is in the Quran as it was coming down. This is a continuation. This is from the Prophet Muhammad and scholars. The Prophet said, beware if anyone wrongs a muhad. Muhad is someone you have made a contract with who lives under your authority. That's what a muhad is. Or diminishes his right. Wrongs him or diminishes his right, or forces him to work beyond his capacity, or takes from him anything without his consent. I shall plead for him on the day of resurrection. Now this is why the early Muslims who took this stuff seriously, this is why they took this stuff so seriously. For them, it was a matter of life and death to follow this thing. It wasn't a matter of showing off. It wasn't a matter of, I'll do it when people are looking, when people are not looking, I won't do it. They had a fear that they would be held accountable on the day of judgment for this thing, for these things. Umar al-Khattab was the second Khalif. He was also known as Umar the Just, because under him he created a just, charitable welfare system where every living thing, he was held accountable for every living thing. During his time, they said he feared that if a dog died under his authority, he was scared that Allah might hold him accountable for a dog dying under his rule. That's how scared he was. And he said, I urge him to take care of, he's talking about the next Khalif, right? I urge him to take care of those non-Muslims who are under the protection of Allah and his apostle, that's the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and that he should observe the convention agreed upon with them and fight on their behalf to secure their safety, and he should not overtax them beyond their capacity. This happened when a non-Muslim stabbed him, and he eventually died of his wounds, right? But as he's dying, he knows, okay, my end is coming, then this is his advice for the next Khalif. So think about it. A non-Muslim kills him, right? But he does not say, oh, these non-Muslims, this, and that. Instead, he's scared that the Muslim community might blame non-Muslim, might associate this non-Muslim with the other non-Muslims, and say, look what the non-Muslims have done. They assassinated our Khalif. Let's, wipe them out or, do something to them. He's worried about that on his deathbed, and he gave this warning. So that tells you why we take this stuff so seriously, what ISIS does. Because our leaders are the best of our community took this stuff seriously. The covenant of protection imposes upon us certain obligations towards al-Dhimma. Al-Dhimma is the people of the book, but it was extended to beyond that legally in the Sharia. They are our neighbors under our shelter and protection upon the guarantee of Allah and His Messenger, peace be upon him, and the religion of Islam. Whoever violates these obligations against any one of them by damaging his reputation or by doing him some injury has breached the covenant of Allah, His Messenger, and his conduct runs counter to the teachings of Islam. Now, look at the year he wrote this at. This was after the Crusades. And this guy's saying, no, the rules are rules, standards are standards. You cannot decide through hate or passions or emotions what your religion is. These are the principles, these are the standards, we stick by the standards. And he was a Sharia scholar, this guy. The reason why I put the dates there was to tell you, because some people say, these Muslims, they say all these things about these verses, but don't they know in Sharia, there's a thing called Nasq, where these verses were abrogated and the violent verses took their place. If that was the case, why is the Sharia scholar saying this? Why is Umar ibn Khattab, who came after the Prophet, those things were abrogated in the lifetime of the Prophet. Nobody can abrogate anything after the lifetime of the Prophet. This guy, Umar ibn al-Khattab, the second Khalif, came after the Prophet. He didn't abrogate it. Neither did Dawood, the guy who recorded these things, hadiths, or Bukhari. Alright, to continue, non-Muslims are called dhimmis because they are under the pledge of Allah and the Messenger of Allah. So this is the same exact thing, right? Except it's a scholar who wrote this book called Sharia, the Islamic law. He's a very famous scholar from Nigeria, and he wrote this in 1997. Because right around this time, Islam was becoming equated with terrorism, and so he wrote this book to clarify a lot of those things, to clarify Sharia principles. Now, the Hanbalis are the ones who a lot of the ISIS they're not even called scholars. The ISIS ideologues follow, they say they follow Imam Ibn Hanbal, right? Because in Western scholarship, he's considered a conservative. When you really study his works, he's neither conservative nor liberal. Those labels don't apply to Islamic scholars. They confuse things, they don't clarify things. But anyway, let's just go with that, right? He's the most conservative guy, whatever. He says, in the Hanbali Fatwa Handbook, which was given to students to teach them as an introductory to the Hanbali fiqh school of law, it says whoever curses a non-Muslim should receive like punishment. Curses a non-Muslim. And the scholar, Mansur ibn Mahud, he did a commentary upon the introduction manual, and this is in 1641, and he said, the reason why this is because a non-Muslim citizen is under protection, and tainting his honor is impermissible. His honor, tainting his honor, his reputation is impermissible. So Sharia, the thing that everybody's afraid of, because, and whenever we engage people who want to instill fear into Americans about Sharia, we ask them, could you please define Sharia? They cannot define Sharia. Can you list a few scholars, 2 or 3 important scholars who expounded upon Sharia? They cannot answer those questions. So in other words, they don't know what they're talking about. They went to some website, they read their website, and they said, oh, Sharia teaches this, Sharia teaches that. Could you tell us which website you went to? The Pamela Geller website. All these sites that are considered hate sites, basically. Right? Robert Spencer, his website. And they some of them have no idea what these websites are, what they teach. But anyway, the Sharia teaches these 5 human rights, and this is before the U.S. Constitution. And constitutionalists in America, historians and political scientists, have studied Sharia. And they say that Sharia, there's a possibility that Sharia impacted how the Constitution was formulated, because Jefferson, Madison, and a few other founding fathers extended themselves to European scholarship about Sharia. Like Volney was a famous French scholar. He wrote about Islamic theology and law. They sought out those books and read, and they said, oh my God, freedom is not something that we're articulating from out of nowhere. Freedom is a principle that all civilizations practice, but the United States, the founding fathers, wanted to combine the different elements of the different civilizations. So if you go to the Library of Congress and you look up and you see the murals, one of them represents the Islamic civilization, along with the Romans, the Greeks, and the British. And so Islam had an impact on the founding fathers and what they thought, what rights were, what human rights were. So the 5 rights are right to life, which Allah gives you, life is sacred. Right to your religion, to practice your religion. Right to intellect. So the right to intellect is a very complex thing in Sharia. To simplify it, it includes the right to use your mind to understand knowledge, right? So you're going to have a diversity of knowledge because people think in different ways. So right to intellect. You have to be intellectually capable of understanding. Right to lineage, family, and honor. That's the topic for a subject from another time. A right to your property. When the founding fathers realized some of this stuff, like Madison, Jefferson, they're like, this has to be included into the Constitution. These principles. The reason why they were so curious about Islam was because they were studying empires and why empires fell. And so they said, why was the Ottoman Empire why did it last for so long? What did they do that we need to do? What did we avoid that they didn't avoid that led to their collapse? That's why they were so interested in Islam. The role of mercy is very important to understand the difference between Islam and ISIS. The role of mercy. Allah is known by 99 names. The 2 of the most important names are Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim. Both of them derive from mercy, right? The merciful are shown mercy by the All-Merciful. Show mercy to those on earth, and He who is in heaven will show mercy unto you. By the way, some of the Sharia scholars extended mercy on earth to animals. So it's humans, animals, plants. Some of them said that you have to show mercy to the earth, the way you plant things, and the way you do things with the earth. So this is not just human life, but all of creation. He who does not show mercy, no mercy will be shown to him. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, is saying this. The Prophet, he's saying this about animals, right? Keep them safe and sound when riding them, and when leaving them, don't use them as chairs, because he was walking one day through the markets and he saw people sitting on them, and he saw the horses, the moods of the horses, and he said this is wrong. So he said this to them: a ridden animal might be better than its rider, it might remember and mention Allah more than its rider does. Now, this goes into the metaphysical concepts of what human understanding of Allah. In Islam, everything that's created understands its relationship with the Creator. But they don't speak our languages. Their languages are completely different than ours. So all living things are aware of the Creator. This is similar to Native American beliefs. And finally, the Prophet once passed by a burnt out anthill. And this vexed him, right? So when the Prophet saw it, he said, "Who burned it?" And when he was informed who did it, he said, "Only the Lord of fire has the right to punish with fire." Actually, he rebuked his companions. And there's another story where an ant bit someone and so he burnt a bunch of ants, and the Prophet rebuked him. This is the Prophet. He has major concerns in his lifetime, but he's talking about ants. All right, now here come to the spicy stuff. Remember when I said the food was really good? It's nothing compared to this presentation. I've added some heat in here. Okay, jihad. All right. Almost all of the sources that I study in the media and in textbooks do not quote the entire verses or section of verses when they talk about jihad. Time magazine has done this, CNN has done this, all the hit websites do this. So what I did was I went from the beginning of the subject to the end of the subject. So you see the whole thing. All right? So the first verse that was revealed, one of the first verses that gave the Muslims permission to fight, was this verse. But the context of this verse is the Muslims lived in a place called Mecca. They were a minority. The majority were pagans. They saw the Prophet's message as a threat to their religion. They persecuted them for 13 years. If someone persecutes you for a day, you feel it. For 13 years, the Muslims went through persecution. They were finally removed from Mecca, their hometown where they were born and raised. They went to Medina, another town. They had an invitation. The Jews, some Christians, and pagans, and a minority of Muslims living there said, "This is a place where people are disputing and fighting with each other. We heard that you're great at settling disputes." Because before he received the revelations, he was great at settling disputes. That's what he was known for, settling disputes. So they said, "We heard you're great at doing that. Why don't you come over here, live with us, settle our disputes?" So he did that, but he was still considered a threat by the Meccan pagans. Because the trade routes, they wanted to control, the pagans wanted to control the trade routes. So what they did was they embargoed the entire city, the new city he went to, Medina. They embargoed it. An embargo meant, back then, this is the arid, dry lands. You can't farm. You can't subsist on farming. The Arabs in Medina, Mecca, the other areas, they depended highly upon trade. Most of their stuff wasn't from farming, it was from trade. So when you embargo an area like that, that's like saying we're gonna suffocate you out of existence. And then when the Muslims found out this was happening, permission was given to fight because there was an army coming to fight them, right? So permission to fight is given to those whom war is being wrongfully waged. So war is already occurring upon them. You're permitted to defend yourself. And you've been driven out of your homelands against all right for no other reason than saying your sustainer is Allah, or God. And then Allah explains it further by saying, had God not given permission for one group to protect themselves, then everywhere He's mentioned, monasteries, churches, synagogues, mosques, they would be destroyed. So Allah is giving the Muslims permission to defend themselves. And verily God is most powerful, almighty, well aware of those, even if we firmly establish them on earth, so they have, they're dominant, still remain constant in prayer and give in charity. That means what happens to people is once they dominate, their ego takes control, and Allah says, no, these are the people that I want to be on earth. And with God rests the final outcome of all events. And secondly, Allah forbids you not with regard to those who don't fight you, nor drive you out of your homes, while dealing kindly and justly toward them. So these are verses that the Islamophobes say were abrogated, except for the fact that had they done a little bit more research, they would have known that the Sharia scholars said that these verses were not abrogated. There were a minority of scholars who said these verses were abrogated. That is true. That is historically correct. But the majority said that's not true. And again, this is the same message. So these are really long verses. I don't want to go into them. You can read them if you want to. But this is another verse that they use. They start with slay them, right? So they start right in the middle of the verse and they say, the Quran teaches you to slay them. Slay them. But they don't begin with the beginning of the sentence. Now, who does that? When you guys talk to each other, do you do that? Do you begin from the beginning of a sentence? Will people understand what you're saying? No. So when they do this is a way to, fool other people. And Muslims are forbidden to fight those as have ties with people to whom you yourselves are bound by covenant. So if you're bound by covenant by someone, if they have ties with someone else, you can't attack those people either. Okay? And as they come unto you, because their hearts shrink from the thought of making war either with you or on their own people, although if God had willed to make them stronger than you, they would have certainly have made war on you. This is back when tribalism was, in effect. Thus, if they let you be, don't make war on them. So even if you know that they would make war on you, don't make war on them. Allah does not give you permission to do that. And offer you peace. Don't harm them. God does not give you permission to harm them. So this goes into the deepest extent of the psychology of defense. Okay? Now here's where we go into ISIS. So the first part is done. This is ISIS, right? ISIS are generically called Harajites or Khawarij. The scholars use the term synonymously. The Harajites were a group of Muslims who, after the Prophet was gone, they arose, but when they read the Quran, they read it wrong. And they did not ask assistance from the scholars to explain the Quran. They made their own conclusions. And they were extreme in their interpretation. They were the first group to fight and kill masses of Muslims. They were the first group. They claimed to be following the Quran, but if Jesus taught the disciples, right? They sat with Jesus, they ate with Jesus, they heard Jesus, they were around Jesus all the time. They have an experience with Jesus that the Christians later did not have, right? Now, if you were living in those times, right? Jesus is gone, he ascended, right? He's not here anymore. But his disciples are still here. Are you going to go to your neighbor who never met Jesus, never consulted the disciples and ask him what Christianity is? Or are you going to go to the disciples? Historians go to the disciples, right? These guys, they didn't go to the companions of the Prophet, who sat with them, ate with them, were with him, learned from him. They did not go to the companions. They went into the Quran and started interpreting the Quran by themselves. And they said, if you're not like us, you don't even deserve to live. So they were the mass murderers, the first group of extremists within Islam. And these are their signs. And the Prophet told us that this group, this mentality, will come from time to time throughout Islamic history. Right? And these are their signs. They'll appear pious and recite the Quran, but act against its teachings. They'll make lawful the excommunication and mass killing of Muslims. You can't excommunicate Muslims. That's not a thing that Muslims do. But they will do it. They will make agreements and break them. They'll have no reputable scholar among them. Because one of the companions of the Prophet was sent to them, Ibn Abbas. May Allah be pleased with him. He was sent to them to negotiate with them, to figure out what they wanted. And he said, who are the scholars among you? And they said, they didn't have any scholars among them. So he said, well, how do you know how to interpret the Quran? You weren't there when these things were revealed. Because the Quran was revealed slowly, bit by bit. Right? And so the people who were there know why it was revealed. They can interpret it. And the Prophet was the final, authority on how to interpret things. They weren't among the Prophet. So Ibn Abbas, may Allah be pleased with him, the companion of the Prophet, asked him, well, how do you know these things? They didn't know. They will depart from the Muslim community and its scholars and curse them. And that's exactly what ISIS does. Their leaders will be divided and eventually fight each other. They've already started doing that. They will be a minority among the Muslims, but they will create much dissension and will always be defeated. They will appear in times of fitna. Fitna means, fitna comes from the root that is similar to fire. And when fire burns, it's hot. If you're at the center of it, it burns you. But from a distance, you can't see anything because of the smoke that fire creates. So in the middle of the fire, it's burning you. You're burned by the tribulation, the trial. And everybody around doesn't know what's going on because of the smoke. That's why we use the word fitna. Fitna is turbulence, tribulation, confusion. Okay? So there was a fitna, a war going on between, the war in Iraq, first of all. right? Which created the context of the rise of ISIS, which I'll get into later. And then the arming of these groups who were fighting Assad, right? And so now there's a civil war in Syria, and that's when they took advantage of it. Nobody disagrees with any of this information. All the terrorist analysts say this. And Muslim scholars of every era will turn against them and refute them. By Muslim scholars, this means the consensus of the Muslim scholars of all sects will condemn them. The Prophet Muhammad said this about extremists: ruined are the extremists. And he kept it short to make his point. He also said, there will be dissension and division in my community, and people will come with beautiful words but evil deeds. Now these guys, they're very eloquent when they recite the Quran. They're very eloquent. He used classical Arabic in his orations, right? When he recited the Quran. Most of the youngsters that I engaged with, who had respect for this guy, said, "But look at the way he recites the Quran, brother." What? Because he recites the Quran well, you think he's on the right path? So they will do that, right? They recite the Quran, but it will not pass beyond their throats. That means the heart is the receptacle of the teachings. You recite the Quran, right? And it goes this way, right? And it goes down the throat into the heart, into your chest. And that's where the Quran rests, in your heart, right? And that's how it transforms you. But for these people, it's not going to go beyond their throats. They will leave the religion as an arrow leaves its target. So they will fire so hard, they'll be so extreme in their practice, they'll go through the religion. And it will not return, right? Until the arrow returns to its notch. And they are the worst of creation. So when Allah says, when the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, says they are the worst of creation, this is why the scholars of the past paid so much attention to this. Another hadith saying of the Prophet said, there will emerge people from my community from the east. So he's in Mecca, Medina area. The east is the Iraq area, right? Who recite the Quran, but it does not go beyond their throats. Every time a faction amongst them emerges it will be cut off. So eventually the Muslims will cut it off. I don't go onto their websites. I rely upon terrorist analysts because I don't want the FBI to come to my house. So, but a consensus of the terrorist analysts that's accurate. They go to the websites, they analyze the websites. They have no idea how politics works. They ask them how the religion works. What about this part of the religion? What about that part of your religion? They have no idea how to answer those questions. So the Kharijites, right? This is another scholar in our history. The Kharijite sect were the first to declare Muslims to be unbelievers because of their sins. They charged as unbelievers whoever disagreed with their innovations, and they made lawful the spilling of blood. The rest of this saying is not necessary because it's just a repetition, right? The second is Ibn Kathir, right? These are really two well-known important scholars. The reason why I chose these scholars is because ISIS uses these guys. It says we do use scholars, we use these guys. But these guys are refuting what they're saying, what they're doing. The second is if the Khawarij ever gained power, they would corrupt the entire earth. And it's interesting that the scholar in 1301 said Iraq and Syria. Iraq and Syria. They would not leave a boy or a girl or a man, right? For in their view, the people have become so corrupt they can't be reformed except through mass killing. And people say, oh, the non-Muslims, the Christians and Jews of Iraq and Syria, they're being persecuted. It's true, they are being persecuted. But the majority of those they're murdering are Sunni Muslims, not even Shia Muslims, Sunni Muslims. Because a lot of people say ISIS is Sunni, because they have a simplistic understanding of ISIS. ISIS is Sunni, they're killing Shia, they're killing Kurds. No, ISIS is not Sunni. They don't represent Sunnah. They don't follow the example of the Prophet, peace be upon him. And they're killing the Sunni scholars and the Imams. Okay, so refuting ISIS, there's a letter written by 126 Muslim scholars, right, on the earth, and they're not nobodies. They're not nobodies. Every single scholar is a significant scholar of his time, place, and region, right? 126 of them wrote an open letter to Baghdadi refuting his ideology, right? One of them was Shaykh al-Islam, Dr. Muhammad Tahir al-Qadri from Pakistan. He was one of the first people to contend this September 11 attacks, right? He wrote a huge fatwa. I was going to bring it, it was too heavy. It's a huge book, dismantles everything they say. But this is one of the best ones I've read in English. Now this guy, right, Sheikh Muhammad al-Yaqubi, he's from Damascus, he's from Syria. So he's in the center of this turmoil. He opposes Assad, he opposes any one faction that kills civilians, He opposes ISIS, he opposes Al-Qaeda. He wrote a refutation of ISIS. He investigated ISIS, his people investigated ISIS. They engaged with ISIS members, fighters, and people fighting them. When they engaged in conversation, members of ISIS, leaders of ISIS, they questioned them. They asked them, can you tell us the way you're judging right and wrong between the people? Who are these people who are judging right and wrong? What is their qualification? And they couldn't give their qualifications. They said they don't really have qualifications. We need people with qualifications. What? Would you appoint a judge, no qualifications at all, and apply his law on the people? What's his law going to be like? It's going to be confusion. It's going to be oppression. So this shocked a lot of people. So all those atrocities you're seeing, it's because their judges don't know what they're doing. And they're admitting they don't know what they're doing. And at the end of this book, he says, whoever has any doubt of the position of ISIS in relation to Islam, one of the ISIS so-called scholars and imams in one of the masjids that they control, this is what he said to the people in a sermon. He said, if the Prophet Muhammad was here, he would follow us. He would follow us. Have you ever heard of a member of a religion saying the person who founded the religion, the one we call master, the person Allah chose to reveal the religion to, he's going to be following us because we're Muslims? What? Do you understand the significance of this, the stupidity involved in this? And he's the imam of that mosque there. And he ends it with that quote, because he wants you to realize, if you had doubts before of any of the refutation in my book, this should clarify your doubt. These are the people. They're so arrogant, they're saying that the messenger of Allah, the messenger of God, we're not going to follow him if he was here. He didn't say, if he was here, we would follow him. No, he would follow us. He would come to us. So, just to clarify, I'm a historian of Islamic Western relations. So this is, in Islamic history, the ideals represent the center here, right? And the blue is the people who practice it. So there are people close to the center, there are people far away from the center. The red represents extremism, okay? But this is what the extremists do. They invert it, they reverse it. So the center is their group. So the blue represents the ignorant masses. 1.7 billion Muslims are ignorant. And this small group is going to show them the truth. And then, this is the worst part of it. What they do is they say the border are enemies of those who call themselves Muslim scholars. The learned. The learned. And they make fun of us. Right? So what they say about alims, the people who know, is that they don't know. They don't know. They don't follow us. If they knew, they would follow us. So they invert the reality, right? So this is terrorism in context. The blue represents the Muslims in the world. The red, which you can't see. Look at this. It's not even scientifically correct. The red does not even reach the center. It's so narrow you can't see it. You can only see it at the tops, right? 1.7 billion Muslims, and those are the terrorists, according to different terrorist analysts and researchers, the maximum number of active terrorists. Even though the analysts who I depend upon, Jessica Stern and Berger, they say this is an exaggeration. There's not this many, right? So now think about it. The blue is the Muslims, the extremist is the red that you can't even see properly, right? Who in their right mind is going to say Islam is about terrorism? Because if Islam really was about terrorism and all those 1.7 billion Muslims are lying about their own religion, come on, does that make sense to you guys? It defies rationalism.
My fractions are good. What's the percentage there?
I don't know. I was really bad at math, Hesham. He was really bad at math too.
Fraction? No, I was a math whiz.
Okay, alright, sorry.
Like 100,000 from 1.7 billion, that's not even 0.0001.
I put 0.0001 in it. You couldn't see it, it was black. I was forced to put 0.1 on it. If you want to understand terrorism, it's mostly political. This is what the terrorist analysts, all of them, almost all of them, there's almost a consensus on this. They say it's not Islam, and they're sick and tired of talking about Islam. They'll talk about Islam as how people use Islam as an ideology to trick people, but they're sick and tired of saying this. But here is the Pentagon, right? The Pentagon, right? Historical, this is in 1997 before September 11. Historical data show a strong correlation between U.S. involvement in international situations and an increase in terrorist attacks against the United States. So what they were saying in a broader way was that it is U.S. policy. Sometimes it's good policy. It's not all negative policy. And this one came after September 11, right? 3 years after. Muslims do not hate our freedom, but rather they hate our policy. So if you read the rest of the quote by itself, it explains. You know, it's not about religion. Because if it was about religion, all the terrorist analysts, all they need is one book to understand terrorism. They would just go to the Quran to understand it. They would just go to the sayings of the Prophet to understand it. Jessica Stern is a very good terrorist analyst. That's why I went to this book. And J.M. Berger, I don't agree with everything he says, but Jessica's better. But they co-authored this book, right? And this is a quote from their book. It basically says, the war in Iraq is what created the space, the potential. It revived Al-Qaeda, because by then, Al-Qaeda was dissipated. Their leaders were gone, right? Their commanders were leaving it because they were like, this is not what Islam teaches. These aren't the goals that were promised us. Right, so one of the guys who wanted to revive Al-Qaeda, because Al-Qaeda was insignificant now, right? They were happy that when the war in Iraq happened. They were happy. If you want to check my facts, go to the Global Terrorism Database. This is a database run by the University of Maryland. And anytime a terrorist attack happens, they input it into the database, right? And terrorism experts go to this database also. And media groups go to it, research groups go to it. I went to the Global Research, right? Research on globalization, the Center for Research on Globalization. So they had an article where they said approximately 2.5% of all terrorist attacks on U.S. soil between 1970 and 2012 were carried out by Muslims. 2.5% is a minority, but if you study the same era, right? It was in 1979 when all these scholars came out and all these politicians came out and all these groups came out saying the number one threat to the United States are the Muslims because of the Iranian Revolution, because of what was going on in Palestine, right? That's what they said. Because of Gaddafi, who wasn't even, he's not even considered an Islamist, right? So that's, Islam was hyperinflated, right? And other terrorist analysts say because of that, now we're suffering because of that because we're trying to educate people about the real threats. We can't do that because we have to answer 7 questions before we even get to the real threat. And they're all questions about Muslims. And we're wasting time. So they're annoyed that this, this is the reality, but the fear-mongering is so high. That's the end of my presentation. This is black, because there's supposed to be another slide here, but I didn't put it, I guess. But I went over because this is stitching fine.
That thing is what?
Oh, my computer is black. Okay, so that's my presentation. I've been in the military for 6 years. I was a Marine for 4 years, 2 years in the Army National Guard. I engaged Marines, right? And I found out that the overwhelming majority of Marines, they don't have any problems with Muslims. But the ones that did, their resources, their sources, were of a dubious nature, not scholarly. So that's why I included mostly scholarship in this presentation, not my opinion. And that's because we need to go to what the scholars are saying, the researchers are saying, because it's vastly different than what Fox News, CNN, media groups are saying, right? And vastly different from Islamophobic groups. Because you read their articles, they even sometimes, like when I first started doing research 15 years ago, they were even fooling me. They're like, oh my God, my research is about this, I gotta investigate this. I didn't know any better. When I started my research, and I depended only upon scholars, historians of Islam, I don't mean Muslims, just Muslims. Majority of the people that I use are non-Muslims. They don't like Islam. Some of them make clear in their books, they don't have a good respect for Islam, but even they're saying, this is not Islam, brother. People, this is not Islam. I intended this presentation to be controversial on purpose, because I want people to ask controversial questions. You're not disrespecting us, and the reason why I mentioned the military is because Marines don't care. They'll ask whatever they want, they'll be up forward to it, and I had a lot more progress with people who are up forward with the controversial stuff than I do if you don't ask controversial stuff, because you think you're insulting me. You're not insulting us, you're not disrespecting us. You should be asking the controversial questions. But before you do, Hesham has another presentation for us.
Let's start. ISIS, a crash course, or second part of it. Malcolm X said, I'm for truth no matter who tells it. I'm for justice no matter who it is for or against. I'm a human being first and foremost, and as such I am for whoever and whatever benefits humanity as a whole. Malcolm X was a Muslim, as you all know. He went from the Nation of Islam to mainstream regular Sunni Islam, and by this quote he summarized what is the aim or the goal of Islamic teachings. This is basically Islam. I'm going to take a survey. From what you heard before you come here today, before Ghanim spoke, who thought from the media or whatnot that ISIS represents some Islamic thing? Can I see hands? Okay. So, we're going to do some important action right now. Okay, we're going to do some optimization. So I need you to be very, very, very careful with me. We're going to use advanced tools. Very slowly and very carefully, zip open the area of your brain because we're going to brainwash it. Okay? This is our world. First, Arabs versus Muslims. Arabs are 22% of Muslims worldwide. These are the Arab nations. As you can see, Somalia is an Arab nation. The Comoros on the bottom right is an Arab nation. Those are the members of the Arab League, the 22, and there are 4 observer states. Brazil is one of them, India and Venezuela and Eritrea. There are 50 Muslim majority countries in the world, the colorful parts of this map. And the 21 largest Muslim populations in the world include only 8 Arab countries. So look at the top. Indonesia is not an Arab country. It's the largest Muslim population, followed by Pakistan, not an Arab country. Those 2 are Muslim majority countries. Following Pakistan is India. India is not an Arab country. It is not a Muslim majority country. But India has the 3rd largest Muslim population in the world. If you go down, you'll find Russia at number 21. Russia is not a Muslim country, but it has the 21st largest Muslim population in the entire world. And we said that there are 50 Muslim majority countries in the world. So just have this in the background. The word Allah, when we say Allah, it is the same root that all Semitic languages used. In Hebrew, Elohim, in Aramaic, Elah. Aramaic is the language that Jesus, may peace be upon him, spoke. The word God, small or capital G, did not exist even 1,000 years ago because the English language did not exist 1,000 years ago. The English language was founded kind of officially in the year 1066 AD. So Allah is the true, this is every hour it comes up and tells me to go and stretch, but we didn't start, so forget about that. Islam versus Muslims. Ghanim made a very good presentation about the real teachings of Islam and whether Muslims follow it or not. So this is the most important thing also to have in mind, that when a Muslim does something, is he following the teachings or she or not? The 5 pillars of Islam, the one in the middle, the most important one, declaration of faith. I bear witness there is no God except Allah. I bear witness that Prophet Muhammad is his last and final messenger. The 5 daily prayers, mandatory wealth purification, zakah, fasting the month of Ramadan, and performing the pilgrimage in Mecca, which is happening as we speak. 6 pillars of Islamic belief. Top right, belief in Allah, God, the Creator. When we say God, as we spoke before, we mean the Creator of the universe. Belief in His angels, belief in His revelations, meaning the Bible, the Torah, and the Psalms of David. Belief in His prophets and messengers. Every single prophet and messenger, as a Muslim, I must believe in, otherwise I'm not following Islam. Believe in the Day of Judgment and the hereafter. And finally, believe in the destiny, good and good. Another time, maybe that would be a question. This is the holiest site in Islam, the mosque, the Kaaba. The black cube in the middle is where every Muslim everywhere in the world prays toward every day. So if you're in Australia, you have a certain direction. If you're in the United States, you have another direction. But everybody is facing the Kaaba here in Mecca. This is a closer side view. Now this is the second holiest site. This is the mosque of the Prophet Muhammad, may peace be upon him, in the city of Medina. And this entire building, it is said that now it is the same size of Medina at the time of the Prophet, may peace be upon him. This is an image from inside. You can see the architecture. This is the third holiest site in Islam in Jerusalem, Al-Quds. You see the Dome of the Rock. That's the most significant image that you always see when it's attached to Palestine and Jerusalem. But the actual farthest mosque, or the Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, is the one, the small, I guess it's purple dome on the left corner of this compound where you see that fence. So this entire site is the third holiest site in Islam, and of course it's contested, and many of the problems that are happening there are because of this. And that's an image from inside that farthest mosque. Now, those are examples of hateful and misleading anti-Muslim advertisements in some US cities by Pamela Geller. You see her website here. So she uses part of a verse, and Ghanim expanded on this. They use part of verses taken out of context, either half-truth or complete fabrications and make up things. Imagine if you're an impressionable person, okay, young or old, it doesn't matter, and you see this. I mean, you take things, many of us take things on face value a lot of the times. So imagine this advertisement. This is another one inside the subway station, 23rd Street, next to the clock. That's on a bus showing Hitler with the Mufti of Jerusalem at the time. And in any war between the civilized man and the savage, support the civilized man, support Israel, defeat jihad. Imagine the message in the paragraph. But it didn't go without a fight. Good people from every background pushed back and put advertisement. This is from the United Methodist Women group. They put those ads. And also, those are from Sojourners and I forgot which group, Rabbis for Human Rights. They have a different name now. Some people took it into their hands and defaced those advertisements. You see the arrow pointing to this thing, caution, this is a war propaganda, which basically it is. This ad was put somewhere in Westchester, I believe, showing the land portions between Palestine and Israel, 1946, before the UN plan is on the left. Then the UN plan of division, you see the white part or the lighter part would be given to Israel, and the darker part would be left for Palestine. And then after the war of 1967, and then roughly right now, this is how it looks like. This ad, the same people who put the other ads talking about this ad as if it's hateful. So go figure. Some churches also have misguided information. They never saw a Muslim before. So for example, top left, the Quran needs to be flushed. Tune into our radio, blah, blah, blah. On the bottom right, Jesus forbade murder, Matthew 26:52. Muhammad approved murder, Surah 8:65. Taking things out of context without scholarly approach or understanding. So just these things are happening, maybe not a lot in cities like New York, but in rural areas, they are rampant. What does the Quran really say? Chapter 2, verse 256. This verse was behind, it's actually the slogan of the organization that I co-founded called Muslims for Liberty. La ikraha fi din. It starts with that. There is no compulsion in religion. And I made sure to put the word choice because scholars of tafsir, of explanation of the Quran, expanded the no compulsion thing into any matter of choice. Because if you don't have a choice, then the act that you're doing is not sincere. And in Islam, every act that you do should be from your heart, otherwise it's not sincere and therefore will not be accepted by God. The other verse, I'm not sure if you mentioned this one, chapter 60, verse 8, Allah forbids you not with regards to those who fight you not for your faith, nor drive you out of your homes from dealing kindly and justly with them, for Allah loves those who are just. Kindly and justly, similarly, the usage was mentioned in the Quran with the parents. And the rights of the parents upon the Muslim person is higher than his own wife and children. So imagine if they're not fighting you, if like somebody is not fighting you for your religion, not kicking you out of your home like as a military invasion or this and that, then deal kindly and justly with them. And now the big one which he mentioned, kill them wherever you find them. They want to tell you the end is near, we say no. And Ghanim mentioned the verses that they forget intentionally, leave the first word of the verse, and, which indicates that it's a continuation of a story. There is a context. And Ghanim mentioned this very well, so I don't want to repeat it. The sanctity worth of life, on that account, we ordained for the children of Israel, the Israelites, the tribes, that if anyone slew a person, unless it be for murder or for spreading mischief in the land, it would be as if he slew the whole people. Basically, if you kill one, as if you killed humanity. If you saved one, it's as if you saved humanity. And this is directly from the Quran, verse 32 in chapter 5. And in this verse, God is saying, as we have ordained before, meaning in the Torah. Islamic rules of engagement, Ghanim mentioned the one about the fire, but some of the other ones, and this is a clear instructions, you don't kill a child, you don't kill a woman, or an elderly, or a sick person, no treachery or mutilation, don't kill an animal except for food, don't destroy villages and towns, don't spoil cultivated fields and gardens, don't kill monks in monasteries, and don't kill those sitting in place of worship. And the last one, which Ghanim mentioned, no one may punish with fire except the Lord of fire. Okay? So what we hear that ISIS did with the Jordanian pilot is absolutely straightforward against Islamic teachings, assuming that it was 100% accurate as we saw. Now, in the media and in the minds of many people, the one on the right, supposedly the Muslim, is oppressed, while the one on the left, supposedly the nun, is devoted. Why is that? Why is this in the mind that when you see a Muslim woman with hijab, that's the first thought that comes to the mind of many? Malcolm X again. If you're not careful, the newspapers will have you hating the people who are being oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppressing. That's why in the beginning we did this very delicate process of washing our brains. Okay? And you can look the two things. You look the main scene, what is happening. The guy on the right is running with the knife or the spear to hurt the guy on the left. But from the screen of the camera, you see the red circle taking this part only, and it looks a different way. Media can do this. I've done editing of videos, and I can make you hate your own mother if I want. Now, the United States government, we're going to get into this in a second. Whenever they want, they label certain groups terrorists and certain groups freedom fighters or whatever they call them. So be careful of this also coming up. This is an example of a meme put on Facebook after the slaying of the soldier in London last year or the year before. The top part, again, the top part is a condemnation of this from the United Muslim Council of Britain. The middle part, don't believe a word they say, the principle of taqiyya authorizes them to lie. Hint, hint, question. And the bottom part, they take part of a verse out of context and put it there and totally confuse people and make them, and it's designed to make you hate not only the person who did this, but whoever the group that he or she belongs to. What do you see from on this tree? What can you see? Anybody? 911, right? Okay. So this was posted also by the Facebook page called Islam Exposed, the truth about Islam. So they posted this saying this is a tree outside of a big mosque in Cairo, and look, they're taunting us, they're putting 9/11 on a tree and this and that. So I looked at it and I laughed out loud because this says Allah in Arabic, but the first letter is on the other side, is not shown. Okay? So you can imagine what's going on the internet. And this has been shared, I mean, I got it early, but it could be shared thousands of times. This lady, Nicole, whoever she is, posted this piece. Islamic militant, forget about the characterization, intervenes to save Bishop. Okay, so I assume that he's absolutely 100% the bad guy, but he did a good thing. So Mr. Frank Anthony Mitchell, the guy with the suit, first comment say, one can't be a good Muslim and a good person at the same time. This is happening out there if you want to take a look. Anyway, the sign of intelligence is that you're constantly wondering. Idiots are always dead sure about every damn thing they're doing in their life. Now, we're going to get into the meat of the issue very fast. Any country in the world, the United States, Russia, Ukraine, Egypt, any country, is made up of three parts for the purpose of our discussion. The land, air, the water, meaning the geography or geology, the people, population, and the government. Any objection here?
What about the animals?
The people. Let's add them to the people. Okay. This is Mr. Osama bin Laden coverage in the independent British newspaper in December of 1993, meaning, hint, 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 after the World Trade Center bombing number 1 in 1993. It happened in February. And this was a positive piece about him. Anti-Soviet warrior puts his army on the road to peace. This is the Independent of London, okay? I don't think I need to say more about this. Now, Mr. Donald Rumsfeld. Greeting Saddam Hussein in 1983 in Baghdad with an American delegation to support him in his war against Iraq. And we know the Iran-Contra and this and that, okay? Moving on. This is Mr. Ronald Reagan in the Oval Office of the White House, sitting with who? With who came to be later the Taliban or other factions. Quote from Ronald Reagan in 1985, these gentlemen are the moral equivalents to America's founding fathers. They might be, we don't know, because we switch opinions a lot in this country. Not just, I mean, I'm not talking about people, I'm talking about the policy of the US government. Okay, this is important. 2.5 minutes. But you need to see this.
What happened at 9/11 is we didn't have a strategy, we didn't have bipartisan agreement, we didn't have American understanding of it, and we had instead a policy coup in this country. A coup. A policy coup. Some hard-nosed people took over the direction of American policy, and they never bothered to inform the rest of us. I went through the Pentagon 10 days after 9/11. I couldn't stay away from Mother Army. I went back there to see Don Rumsfeld. I'd worked for him as a White House fellow in the 1970s. All this is in the book. And I said, am I doing okay on CNN? He said, yeah, fine. He said, I'm thinking about it. He says, I read your book. And he said, this is a book that talks about the Kosovo campaign. And he said, I just want to tell you, he said, nobody's going to tell us where or when we can bomb. Nobody. He said, I'm thinking of calling this a floating coalition. What do you think about that? I said, well, sir, thanks for reading my book. And, he said, thanks, that's all the time I've got. Really. And I went downstairs. I was leaving the Pentagon, and an officer from the Joint Staff called me into his office and said, I want you to know, he said, sir, we're going to attack Iraq. And I said, why? He said, we don't know. He said, I said, well, did they tie Saddam to 9/11? He said, no. he said, but I guess they don't know what to do about terrorism, and so they think, but they can attack states, and they want to look strong, and so I guess they think if they take down a state, it will intimidate the terrorists. And you know, it's like that old saying, he said, if the only tool you have is a hammer, then every problem has to be a nail. Well, I walked out of there pretty upset, and then we attacked Afghanistan. I was pretty happy about that. We should have. And then I came back to the Pentagon about 6 weeks later. I saw the same officer. I said, why haven't we attacked Iraq? We still going to attack Iraq? He said, oh, sir. He says, it's worse than that. He said, he pulled up a piece of paper off his desk. He said, I just got this memo from the Secretary of Defense's office that says we're going to attack and destroy the governments in 7 countries in 5 years. We're going to start with Iraq, and then we're going to move to Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Iran.
Basically, a few days after 9/11, he went to the Pentagon. He had been retired at the time. He was NATO Supreme Commander. Met with Donald Rumsfeld. Brief meeting, nothing major happened. He saw somebody of his subordinates, so he pulled him aside and told him, we're going to attack Iraq a few days after 9/11. Why did you find anything connecting Saddam to 9/11? No. Why are you attacking Iraq? We don't know. That's the answer from the active military guy. A few weeks after he went, after the Afghanistan war started, and he said here that he was happy about it. That's, of course, I'm not happy because this was another unjust war. But anyway, he asked him, so why we didn't attack Iraq? He said it's much worse. We're going to attack 5 countries in the next 7 years, including Iraq, Syria, Somalia, Sudan, and Iran. Okay? This is within the first few months after 9/11. Sudan has been divided into 2. Libya, you know what happened. Syria, you see what's going on. Okay? I've been saying for a couple of years now, the road to Tehran, the capital of Iran, passes through Damascus, the capital of Syria. And we're going to see why in the map here right now. If you can see the cursor, here's Egypt, that's where I am from, and here's Syria, okay? Here's Iraq, and that's where the supposed ISIS is controlling large parts of those 2 countries here. This is Turkey on top, and this is Iran here on the east of Iraq. Now, let's go up a little. Right here is Moscow, the capital of Russia. Russia does not have access to water. Okay? The only access Russia has is to the Black Sea. And in order to get to the Mediterranean, and then to the Red Sea, and then to the Arabian Sea, and then to the ocean, or west here to the Atlantic, they must pass through the Bosphorus, right here, which Turkey controls. Turkey is a member of NATO, okay, which is by default anti-Soviet Union from before and still anti-Russia somehow. Now, Ukraine up here, you see the turmoil happening in Ukraine right now and the fight between whether Ukraine becomes pro-Western or pro-Russian. Pro-Western meaning automatically will be a member of NATO because they want to line around Russia. Now, the US effectively has control over Iraq and the Gulf nations, okay, under their control. Turkey is a NATO member. Those small countries don't really count for much, except there are American bases all around this area. Now add Ukraine, and you have a complete circle around Russia. So what's happening now, Syria has been a strategic ally to Russia for the longest time. Why? One of the reasons is, one, there's an oil pipeline that passes through Syria into the Mediterranean. 2, Syria gave Russia easements on using their water or some of ports. So Syria is very crucial, strategically important to Russia. So therefore, the fall of Assad would be a strategic, huge loss to Russia, whether it's Putin or anyone else. And we're talking here like you're gonna lose your place in the world. The United States and Russia are in the Cold War #2 that is taking place now in this area of the world. In particular, what's happening in Syria is another Cold War where Russia and Iran supporting Assad versus the other part. The creation of ISIS, how in the world, all of a sudden, overnight, 2 years ago, ISIS controlled large parts of Syria and Iraq. How does that happen overnight? Okay, so something is not adding up here. Now, there is a retired colonel with the name of Ralph Peters. Right after 9/11, he drew a map of the Middle East and the current situation, which is the top part, and he said that this should be, the bottom part should be the new Middle East map. So basically, taking parts of Iran, Turkey, Syria, and Iraq and giving it to a free Kurdish new country. Afghanistan dividing into 2 parts and taking parts from Pakistan. Yemen is enlarging and taking parts of Saudi Arabia, and a new Islamic sacred state to control the holy sites of Islam in Mecca and Medina and the surrounding areas. And Jordan also takes parts of Saudi Arabia. And here is I think the most crucial thing that I see in this map is the division of Iraq into 3 parts. But not only that, the bottom part of Iraq would be a Shia state, and he gave them the control over the oil of the western shores of the Persian Gulf. These things don't happen in a vacuum. There's something in the background working that we don't get to know about these things. So that's another point to have in mind. John McCain went to Syria to meet with the so-called freedom fighters, this and that. This guy in the red circle on the left is none other than Baghdadi, the new caliph of the Islamic State. So,
When was that?
this is in 2012, I believe. Okay, and this is like taken a screenshot from CNN. So, now the role, very fast in a couple of minutes, the role of the Muslim community in combating this. As Ghanim stated before, we are doing our best to control and educate our own people. But I have been a witness myself to where the FBI send undercover informants to mosques and other people, entice them into saying that they would do something wrong, sometimes provide fake bombs or whatnot, and at the last moment claim that they arrested a terrorist. Let me give you an example. This guy here, his name is Osama El-Dawoodi. He was right here in Staten Island. Right after 9/11, maybe 2002, 3, 4, something like that. This is the Washington Post, May 29, 2007, after he's done his damage. What happened is he came to the mosque I usually go to, on Richmond Terrace. He became a regular. I used to see him. I used to go to the mosque much more than I go now, so I used to see him a lot. The early morning prayer, the last prayer of the night, this and that. So he became one of us. I mean, we're not gonna question people who are coming to pray. 2 incidents made me very wary of him. One time I'm leaving the mosque after a prayer, and he stopped me, called my name, Hesham. I turned, I am with the brothers. I was dumbfounded, and I said, what do you mean? We are brothers. He said, no, I'm with the brothers in Afghanistan. Mind you, this is 2003. Okay? Muslims were being picked up by law enforcement, right or wrong, taken to immigration detention. This is until we find, like, you were guilty until proven innocent at that time. So it was a very scary time for us, and this was a reckless talk, had he been like talking without thinking. So the fear inside me kicked, and I yelled at him right in inside the mosque, you shouldn't be talking like that. You don't know who's listening and who's recording and this and that, not knowing that he's the one who's recording. Okay? At the time, there was a weird small truck that parks right outside the mosque on the curbside. Many times I see it coming in or out. And we used to joke, maybe this is the surveillance truck. Turns out it's true, you know. And we said, you know what? Good. Maybe they will hear something that will make them realize the truth. Like, this was our mentality. We have nothing to hide, and come and see what we do. Another time, I was going to Brooklyn, the mosque on 5th Avenue in Bay Ridge. It's called Mus'ab ibn Umair. Right next to that mosque was a Islamic bookstore run by a guy who left his nephew to man it. So I used to buy my calling cards when I called my family back in Egypt. Sometimes I buy books, tapes, whatever. I've known this kid. He was roughly 22, 23 years old at the time. I've seen him for a few years by now. And I noticed that he's not all there. You know, there is something that's not there. I'm not saying extremism. No, like mentally you don't think he's all there, okay? But we're not gonna shun people because they're not all there. No one is without something in them, okay? So I saw him and this guy, the informant, Osama Dawoodi, only two in the store when I entered. And from the first few moments you get from the body language and the words used, you get what was happening. Osama Dawoodi, the informant, was inciting Siraj, the kid, the 23-year-old, against America and Americans. He was, later on we learned that he showed him pictures from the prison torture of Abu Ghraib. So this kid thought in his mind, and the informant actually made it seem so that he's so knowledgeable about Islam that he's a scholar. So he was kind of shepherding this kid. He was driving him after work from Brooklyn to his home in Queens. And this guy, the informant, is at least double the age of Siraj. Okay? When I heard him kind of trying to incite the kid like that, I intervened. I said, no, most Americans, and it's true until today, don't have a clue what is really happening over there or even over here. So, and we have a verse in Quran, لا تزر وازرة وزر أخرى. No soul shall bear the burden of a deed except the one who did it. And this is, I think, in the Bible as well. So it is not fair, it is not okay, it is not Islamically acceptable to blame someone for something that he or she didn't do. The guy stuck to his heels, and I had to leave. But at the time, it was only speech. So I didn't put much into it. I didn't know that he's an informant and he's doing this for the FBI and the NYPD. The other kid who was arrested from Staten Island, James and Shafi, he was 18 at the time, he was deemed clinically schizophrenic. James, they persuaded him and his family to testify against Siraj. So James served 5 years. Siraj is serving 30 years in federal prison as we speak, even though in court it was shown a video that the informant filmed in his car where Siraj is saying, you know what, I better do nothing before I ask my mother. And this is a terrorist serving 30 years in prison. And this is the case that Bloomberg and Kelly, the former police commissioner, hold as the hallmark of their success in fighting terrorism. Even the backpack that supposedly the explosions were supposed to go in, it was given to those kids by the informant. They cooked the entire plot and attached to gullible, not all their young Muslim men. And this has been happening all over the country.
Does the government work for us or do we work for the government? Can the federal government take credit for saving us from a plot of its own creation? Has the federal government kept us safe, or does it just want us to think that it has kept us safe? The FBI has foiled about 17 plots to kill Americans during the past 10 years. What it will not tell you is that there have been 20 foiled plots, and of them, 3 were interrupted by members of the public. The 17 that were interrupted by the feds were created by the feds. They all have a common and reprehensible thread. They were planned, plotted, controlled, and carried out by the federal government itself. In all of these 17 cases, from the Fort Dix 6 to the Lackawanna 7 to the Portland parade bomber, the feds found young men of Muslim backgrounds. They befriended them, cajoled them, and persuaded them that they could change the world by killing Americans. In some cases, the federal agents used third parties to act as middlemen. The third parties were typically persons who had been convicted of crimes and who, in return for leniency at their own sentencings, were willing to work with the same feds who prosecuted them in order to help the feds entrap whomever else those feds were pursuing. Thus, in all 17 of these cases, because of the command and control of federal agents, no one was ever in danger, no one was harmed, no bomb went off, and no property was damaged. The defendants were essentially charged and convicted for playing a game with federal agents. You get the picture. Are any of these plots criminal? Can the government just pick and choose whom to seduce and then lower the boom at the right time and arrest its would-be Confederates? Is this a proper and efficient use of law enforcement resources? The answers to these questions are obvious, and they are not good. The courts have made this legal, so long as the target of these plots had a mental predisposition to cause harm. But none of this keeps us safe. All of this makes us less free, as any one of us can be entrapped. And we are fools if we praise the government for exposing a plot of its own creation and saving us from a danger that never existed. Can the government break the law in order to enforce it? Well, when it does, it becomes a law unto itself, and the rule of law dies as the feds decide whom to target and whom to trap. Think about it. Are we really safe in a false sense of security? Why do we pay the government to trick us into believing it is keeping us safe? When no one is harmed and the government controls the plot, aren't we just punishing someone for his thoughts? And in a free society, aren't free people free to think as they wish? This must be so, because if the government can punish our thoughts, there are no limits to its power.
Very briefly, another case, a family pleaded with their son, who actually went to Turkey in order to go to Syria and join ISIS. They pleaded with him, they succeeded in convincing him to come back. He did not make it. He did not go to Syria, he did not join ISIS. He came back. He's now facing terrorism charges. What can we do? Tell me. I'll end with that. Thank you.